Bitcoin itself is one of the most polarizing and interesting investments out there. So let's kind of dive into it. Today, kind of the goal is to go talk about what these countries are doing and also talk about how you can potentially play some of these things and what it might mean for you. So let's dive into El Salvador.
Yeah.
El Salvador is one of the most interesting countries out there today. What are they doing in El Salvador? And why is Bitcoin always associated with El Salvador?
El Salvador has adopted Bitcoin as an official store of value and a way to exchange goods through Bitcoin. So you can make Bitcoin payments. But I want to be clear that Bitcoin itself can be a little bit cumbersome. So for example, if I was to hand you a piece of paper that's a fiat dollar bill, US dollar bill from me to you, like that's really easy, right? Bitcoin, I can transfer, phone to phone, but that's going to be a little more cumbersome. But the point is that El Salvador is looking at Bitcoin as a store of wealth. And it's looking at that because number one, it's much easier for somebody to say, I have X amount of Bitcoin that I own versus I'm carrying around a sack of gold coins. So to store your wealth, it's actually much easier to do that with Bitcoin. And there's tons of other arguments, but the point is that El Salvador is looking at Bitcoin as a store of wealth. And for nation states around the world, they're looking at Bitcoin now as an alternative to gold. Because gold, yes, you can put in a vault. It proves that you have certain amounts of value that your
very
country,
sound money.
Yeah,
yes.
Your country has accumulated. You can back your currency with this. But now governments are saying, wait, Bitcoin's this other alternative. Maybe it's better than gold. Maybe it's more efficient, but also it's more transparent. One country can say, how much Bitcoin do you have? And it's verifiable. It's on the blockchain. You can look, El Salvador has X amount. And other countries that are scratching their head going, it's not a bad idea, especially because with gold reserves, the U.S. is the number one gold holder in the world. But are they? Does anybody go into Fort Knox? That's kind of the whole Rand Paul audit the Federal Reserve. No one really knows what's going on down there. And, maybe we do.
And there's incentive to keep it secret.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe we do have that gold. Maybe the U.S. does have that gold, but maybe they don't.
Yeah.
And then there's also confusing part. Some countries store their gold and other countries. So the U.K. and London is famous for holding gold bullion for other countries. But why would you have another country store your gold? That's crazy. Where Bitcoin, you can hold the keys. You can say, hey, I have custody over this value in the blockchain. This certifies that my country has this amount of wealth. So anyways, I want to get that clear because that's how countries are looking at Bitcoin right now. Yes, they're looking at it from a transaction value, but they're more looking at it from, hey, how do we verify that our country is worth X amount of money? And how do we make that clear for other people looking at it? And it's, like I said, other countries are scratching their head and going, this might work out pretty well.
And it has.
Yep.
That's the thing. It's been one of those things where they got some criticism because when the price of Bitcoin dropped, it was like, oh, is this actually a good decision? And then the price of Bitcoin rocketed back up. And guess what? They're well in the black.
Yep.
And so they've received criticism, and they've also now at the other side, they've done quite well with their trades.
Absolutely. So that's the first part that is just important to realize. The other part, as it pertains to El Salvador and these other countries we're going to discuss, is how are these countries accumulating Bitcoin? How are they holding it? Are they paying with their money? Like, how are they doing this? And you mentioned in the intro, which is they're using excess energy from their country to mine Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And El Salvador is a tiny country in Central America.
But why does that matter? Because one of the biggest criticisms of Bitcoin is the fact that it uses tons of energy.
Yep.
Guess what? Countries are now using excess energy. This is the thing where there's some confusion. Like, there are countries that have excess energy that they don't really have a use for. What are they putting it towards?
Yep. So in the case of El Salvador, tiny country, but they have a lot of volcanoes. So it's essentially heat being released by the earth, and they have a power plant that runs off this heat. Yes, during the evening times when there's high energy load, or during, say, the morning time when people are watching TV, making breakfast and all that, they can consume all that power. But in the middle of the night, the earth is still letting off all this heat, and the energy is still being converted through these power plants. But unless you have an enormous battery or some sort of power holding device, which they don't, it basically goes to waste. But now they're taking that excess energy and they're running mining machines to mine Bitcoin. And what they're essentially doing is they're taking renewable resource from the earth and converting it into a store of value, which is Bitcoin. So it's pretty incredible because You think of Tesla power packs on the wall where you store energy. And yes, there is ways to store energy through batteries, but at the scale that the earth lets off energy, there's really no other way to efficiently do it other than mining Bitcoin and putting it in these batteries. But for a country such as El Salvador, they're a tiny country, but all of a sudden they have all this natural energy coming from the earth and they convert that to value. That's crazy. It could be transformational for them as a country.
I mean, we talked about this being 21st century mining. It's the same as if they discovered gold, right? The only difference is, you can argue it's cleaner, right? Because they're taking this energy from a volcano, turning it into a store of value, and then securing their currency reserves.
Absolutely. And so, again, El Salvador is the perfect example, but it's just the tip of the iceberg around the world when it comes specifically to renewable energy and energy that would normally get blown off or get wasted or just go into the atmosphere or not captured. So it's opening up like Pandora's box for a lot of these countries saying, we can convert this energy that we have into wealth.
Totally. I think there was a headline, they mined 474 Bitcoins during the last 3 years, I think, or maybe even less than that.
And to be clear, that's a fraction of what the country actually owns.
Totally. That's just what they mined.
Right.
Yeah.
From heat
from the
coming
volcano.
From the earth. Exactly. just like, oh, wow, that's just some free money over here. Let's just pick this off.
So El Salvador is not the only country doing it.
Yep. There's literally dozens more.